Hi, my name is Liz Stitt. I'm with Redistricting Partners. We are working with Goleta West Sanitary District on their districting process. So I am here to help you learn more about the process and how you can get involved. So what this video will be covering is what is districting, what are the traditional districting and redistricting principles we use when drawing lines, how you can get involved in this process. And then, of course, we'll be talking about the census data for the district and the public hearing schedule. So let's jump into it. What is districting? At its heart, it is just the initial process of creating election district boundaries. So right now, Goleta West Sanitary District is considered at large. And what that means is voters from throughout the district currently vote for all board members. However, when you go to a districted system, um, all of a sudden you have 5 different districts in the sanitary district. So what these boundaries do is it determines 2 things. First, who is eligible to run for office and who's eligible to vote for that position. So in both cases, you have to live in that specific district in order to qualify to run or vote for the person running. So we do have a set list of criteria that we follow when we are drawing lines. We got this from the California Fair Maps Act. This applies specifically to cities and counties, but we see it as best practice for special districts as well. So we do follow this list, and it's a ranked list of criteria. So first and foremost, each district has to be relatively equal in size, and we're looking at the US Census population to determine whether it's equal in size. So we're not just looking at voters, we're not just looking at citizens, we are looking at the population at large. And then we also have to make sure that the districts are contiguous. This is possibly a word you haven't heard before, but we use it all the time in demography. It essentially just means that your district is one whole piece, and we're not going from one part of the district to the other and saying that's District 1. It all has to be touching. There are 2 different ways of looking at contiguity. So first, there's literal contiguity, which sounds exactly like it is. So if you're looking at a map and it's one whole piece, then that would be literally contiguous. However, functional contiguity is possibly a different thing. So if you're looking at that same map, but there's a big mountain in the middle and you can't get around it, and you actually have to leave that district, go into a neighboring district just to get on the other side, then that would be functionally non-contiguous. So these are 2 things we think about when we're drawing lines. So I like to give a couple of examples of what contiguity is because it can be confusing. So this is an example of what is considered non-contiguous. You'll see that this portion of the city up here is away and not touching with the rest of the purple district. So in order for this to be contiguous, it would need to be joined over here. So that is an example of non-contiguity. However, this is an example of functional contiguity. So that highlight you see there is actually a railroad. And what it does is it splits the rest of the city. So it's actually really hard to get from one side of the city to the next because of this railroad. So we use that as a natural boundary, and it allows people to drive from one portion of that District 5 to the other without any disruption. And of course, we want to make sure lines are easy to identify and they're understandable. So trying to follow natural boundaries like rivers, or in the case of that railroad, a man-made boundary is also very helpful when drawing lines. And then we want to keep districts compact. So we're trying to avoid those funny looking shapes that people tend to associate with gerrymandering. There are some states who use mathematical formulas, ratios to determine compactness. But in the state of California, we have a very eloquent definition where it's essentially if you have or you don't want to bypass a nearby population for another one when they are essentially the same. So we're trying not to bypass nearby populations. This is an example we like to share with compactness. You'll see on the left, that was the first map they drew, and then we redistricted it. And you can see on the right that it's far more compact. So we're trying to protect communities and not split them up. And then I want to spend more time talking about maintaining communities of interest. So this is really where the public comes to shine in the districting process. We want to hear from the public in terms of where your community is, what makes you special, so we know not to split you up in the districting process. So we're looking for shared group cultural identity information, and that includes things like neighborhoods as well, geographic nature, and then the relationship to Goleta West Sanitary District. So a definition of community of interest is it's a group of people, a community who share policy concerns and would benefit from being districted together. We like to think of them as building blocks of districts. And we do this to avoid diluting their strength at the voting station and avoid diluting their voice when they voice their concern with their elected officials. So communities of interest are a very important aspect of districting and redistricting. This is a very subjective and open-ended definition to be as inclusive as possible. And of course, there are other laws that apply to districting and redistricting, such as the Federal Voting Rights Act. And there are communities referenced in that, particularly protected classes. In California, the three most common protected classes are Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. However, we do have to point out that while communities of interest may include race, it absolutely cannot be the predominant factor when drawing district boundaries. So I like to show this slide for people to see how expansive communities of interest are. It can include neighborhoods, but it goes well beyond neighborhoods. It includes common themes such as downtown urban or rural and agricultural, homeowners or renters. So these are all people with similar policy concerns and are impacted by decisions made by elected officials. However, there are communities not considered communities of interest under the Fair Maps Act. So that law explicitly prohibits three groups from being considered a community of interest. That includes political party affiliation, incumbents, and political candidates. And that's there to make sure that folks aren't gerrymandering to favor a particular person or party. And then the next part of this slide is not prohibited, it's just really hard to draw. So a group of similarly minded people who do not share a location or a community of interest that's district-wide. So remembering that we really want to protect a community of interest and draw them in the same district if possible. If they're district-wide, that would be impossible to do, right? So just a couple of things to keep in mind. And then when people do provide their own testimony, these are the questions that we like to ask. So does the community have a shared culture, characteristic, or bond? Is there a community or is the community geographic in nature? Specifically, we're looking for street names and boundaries or landmarks, something that tells us where your community is, so we don't inadvertently split it up during the districting process. And then, how would you describe your community's relationship with Goleta West Sanitary District, and how are their decisions impacting you? So there are multiple ways for you to get involved. First, you're always welcome to all the meetings on districting, and you'll see at the end of this video there's a list of public hearings. You can also go on the website to access the calendar. So you're more than welcome to speak directly to the board of directors in public hearings. They're the decision makers, so it's wonderful that you have direct access in that way. And you can talk about your community of interest, or you can talk about which maps you like or don't like. So you're welcome to voice any idea or concerns you have about redistricting or districting at that point. You're also welcome to email the district. So if you can't make those meetings, your voice will still be heard via email. You can email us at info@goletawest.org. And then, of course, you're welcome to draw your own maps. So you can use this map in a couple of ways. You can draw your own communities of interest, or you can draw your own districted map. So this map here has an estimate of the population in each of those regions, and you add them up and you can create relatively equal districts, and we can use that to then draw maps. So we love whenever we get input from the community this way. I know that my firm has used these maps from the public and used it for official maps later on. So they work, and we encourage you to draw your own maps if that's something you want to do. And then now let's get into the census data. You'll see that the district is about 41,575 people. When you split that 5 ways, each district is going to have about 8,300 people. So that's the ideal size for each district. You'll see here that you have the 2020 census data and the citizen voting age population data. We use those 2 different data sets for different reasons. First, the 2020 census data tells us if the districts we draw are relatively equal. And then the citizen voting age population tells us if we're following the Federal Voting Rights Act. So we look at both. Both are very important for districting in general. And whenever you see a map, you will see both of these data sets. And finally, let's talk about the public hearing schedule. So we have already had 2 pre-map meetings on June 1st and August 1st, and there are 2 more post-map meetings coming up. So September 5th, and this is being recorded in August 2023. So September 5th is when we plan on creating draft maps. September 19th is when they will come back with revised draft maps. And then October 3rd is when the board is planning on voting on a map. The public is welcome to participate every step of the way, and you're welcome to submit maps even up until August 3rd or October 3rd. So we genuinely hope that you'll be participating with us and follow along, ask questions, and hopefully we will see you at an up and coming meeting. Thanks for watching.